the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
The remaining member on this show outside of Evan Swartz, who will be hopefully back next week because the Niners are playing football again next week, so we'll see how they do. But your team out. What are you thinking about your instant reaction to the Steelers going down in Buffalo today?
You know, in the movie Dodgeball, Vince Vaughn's character, Peter LaFleur, says it's hard to be disappointed if you don't have expectations. So, like, I didn't expect anything going into this game. And early on, those lack of expectations seemed to be well earned because it was 21-0 and pretty soon into the game. And the Steelers looked like an absolute mess. They went 5 plays punt on their first drive, and then the Bills marched 80 yards and scored a touchdown. And then they went 3 and out, 1 play fumble, and then the play after the fumble, Dalton Kincaid catches a touchdown. That's quickly 14-0. And at that point, the game was over. I mean, if we're being real, after the 7-0 touchdown pass to Dawson Knox, the game was probably pretty over. But once it reached double digits, nobody expected the Steelers to come back. I will say this: Mason Rudolph, outside of one throw that was intercepted, played well. You know, in large part, he made all the right throws that he needed to make. He hung in the pocket, extended the play when he needed to. Got them within a score. Like he threw 2 touchdown passes, got it to within 24-17. But even then, like you said, the result was never in doubt for Buffalo. I think any sort of, the Steelers coming back was more or less Buffalo playing with their food and a little bit of bad luck. They had a field goal block, which led to a touchdown for the Steelers. So it was, a lot of weird stuff in the second half, but the result was never in doubt. Josh Allen played fantastic, had 4 total touchdowns, ran for a 52-yard touchdown where, like, this is the second straight week where defensive backs just made business decisions and said, yeah, I'm not tackling that behemoth of a human running at me. And it's paid off both times for the Bills. But in terms of, like, my takeaways for the Steelers overall, and if nobody saw this yet, Mike Tomlin was about to get asked about his future by Brooke Pryor, great Brooke Pryor of ESPN. And before she could even finish the question, homie just walks off the podium. And, whatever, I guess. I personally don't think he's going anywhere. But and we've had this conversation on here before. I like Mike. He's been here for a very long time. But I do find it odd that, like we've done it on this show where we can talk about, oh man, is Nick Sirianni in trouble when he was just in the Super Bowl last year? And by the way, I think that he should be in trouble. We can talk about, oh man, is Sean McDermott in trouble when he's consistently in the divisional round and the AFC Championship game, which, by the way, I was also on board with. Yeah, Sean McDermott's got to go. But the second someone says, oh man, Mike Tomlin should probably be fired from Pittsburgh, everybody's up in arms. Oh my goodness, how dare Steelers fans be critical of Mike Tomlin? For they should be grateful for what they have. Like, sure, man, he will be, if he does decide he wants to leave, he will have his pick of where he goes. And level-headed, sane people will wish him well, and he will likely succeed. If he goes to like the Chargers, they're going to win. And I hope they do. But we can also acknowledge this thing's run its course. And much like the Seahawks just did with Pete Carroll, I think the Steelers should be like, look, man, this isn't going to be a marriage forever. And there's not going to be a head coaching pool of Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel, Bill Belichick, if they decide to go that route. There's not going to be a pool like this probably ever again. So, like, thank you, but it's probably best if we both just kind of go our separate ways. And look, if he still wants to coach, then great. Guess what? You trade him and you get some picks. That's cool. And you go into 2024 with whomever your new head coach is, and you try to build for the future with more than likely a new quarterback, which let's hope so, and go forward in a new era. But I think it's perfectly okay to say, Mike, thank you for everything you've done, but this thing has absolutely run its course, and it's time for both of us to kind of go in a separate direction. And I think that's what they should do. It's not what I think they will do, but that's my thoughts.
But also, I mean, JP, could you also spin it for the Steelers like, hey, because Tomlin's won a Super Bowl, because Tomlin is still somewhere in that top 10 and coach of the NFL, still somewhere in there, that like, hey, The Matt Canada stuff was ridiculous. That was you were a little too loyal there. Just clean this up. We're gonna open up the pool, just like expand how you're gonna do these coordinators, because we see like in Philadelphia, right across the way, where when you lose some premier coordinators on both sides of the ball, things can get real in a hurry. Like Tomlin, just hey, maybe you look at it this way, where you're like, hey, we need to revamp the whole staff around you, just see what you want to keep, what you don't, but changes need to be made below you, and real changes that like are inspiring hope on the offensive side of the ball. You need your Todd Monken in a way. We're Ravens fans. We're very frustrated with the Greg Roman experience. Like, it had run its course. It was successful early on for Lamar, but it had run its course. So they make the Todd Monken hire. They go to the high school ranks. I think that's part of what I think Tomlin would need to do here, because Harbaugh's been there forever in Baltimore, and part of what's going to keep Harbaugh in Baltimore for a lot longer, because people forget Baltimore fans were getting a little anxious about Harbaugh not too long ago. But when you get an MVP quarterback and you have him long term, it just kind of gives you a lot of cachet with the fan base. And right now, Mike Tomlin does not have a franchise quarterback. They tried with Kenny Pickett. That experiment should be over. But I think that's something. That's why I would be a little hesitant of moving on from Tomlin, is like how quickly this can shift back in a positive, good long-term direction for Tomlin and the Steelers if you can clean those things up, which I understand are kind of big, but I still think that's a possibility for Pittsburgh.
I think an encouraging thing for the Steelers and Steelers fans is that Mike Tomlin actually fired Matt Canada during the season, because most years, I mean, even last year, the year before, he has been very loyal to his assistants, even though they have not executed very well. He decided to make the change midway through the season. I think that's a very positive sign. I think still getting this team to the cusp of the playoffs and making the playoffs is still an impressive accomplishment. I just think there's something to always, and I get kind of the, you're going to end up in QB purgatory portion of it, but I think there is something to always being competitive. I think that is something that is very impressive, considering the division that Steelers play in and the murderer's row of quarterbacks and teams you have to face in the conference. Being able to consistently put out and being able to consistently win a bunch of games without having that like calling card offensively is still super impressive. Of course, like maybe it's TJ Watt like splash plays, but those still matter. You know, I think getting rid of Tomlin would be a little bit of a rash decision, but I do understand the idea of bringing him in the offseason and be like, hey man, something's got to change offensively. Like this has got to be it, because you're kind of falling behind, because now everybody in the division has a quarterback and you still don't. This has got to be it. You know, you got to find your hire. I think maybe hiring a guy like Gerard Johnson from the Houston Texans. Maybe T. Martin, who is the QB coach for the Ravens, wants to come across to the other side. He seems like a coach that'd do wonders. Maybe Anthony Lynn wants to get back into the coordinator game. He's running backs coach for the Steelers, not the Steelers, for the Niners right now. There are a lot of options. I just think now it's down to, will Tomlin go and find somebody? Because I think that's what he has to do. Like he has to go bring somebody in. Steelers don't really bring a lot of people in. Like this has got to be I think the biggest comparison, I guess, to a non-NFL thing is Dabo at Clemson, where he's got to go bring in his Garrett Riley. He can't make the internal hire anymore. So this is a crucial year. This is a crucial offseason for him.
And that's the thing too. Like there's going to be, I mean, you named a few people. There's a few people I have in mind too, whether it be, Clint Kubiak, I think is a name that can be looked at. Jake Peetz, he's a pass game specialist for the Rams. If you wanted to look at a Shane Waldron, maybe a Shane Day, like there's plenty of guys out there who have either been coordinators before or are in a position where they are parts of offenses that you can look at the success that they've had and say, okay, this guy is ready to, take the next step and be a coordinator. I think that a lot of fans, like myself included, want to see him go to, okay, let's go get, a guy from the LaFleur tree, the Shanahan, the McVay tree, somewhere on one of those staffs and try to, get some of that magic to work in Pittsburgh. I understand. I'm not numb to the fact that, people would think it's crazy if they would move on from Tom. Like, I get it. But at the same time, their last 5 playoff appearances, they have lost all 5 games. And all 5 games, they have allowed 31 or more points. In 3 of those games, they've allowed 40 or more points. Like, they have, for the past almost decade now, they've been good enough to not be good enough. And once they actually play teams that are good, they get boat raced. And that's not a new thing. That's a reoccurring thing for, the end of like peak, actually good Ben Roethlisberger and into, the last moments of Roethlisberger's career, and then into now where, like, yeah, that's cool that you're always competitive, as JP pointed out. But like, as fans right now, would you rather be like what the Steelers are right now, or would you rather be the Bengals and stink for a year or two, but you finally get a franchise quarterback and it turns around? Like, that's right now they're the Marvin Lewis.
But they got kind of lucky, man.
So,
the Bengals got lucky.
The Bengals got lucky and got the first overall pick. And then the next year had the first overall pick get hurt. So you're able to draft another like elite receiver within the top 5. Like, it's not like beating the Bengals isn't something that happens often.
Also, I never thought I would hear a Steelers fan like, we want to be the Bengals here. We want at any point in my lifetime when growing up. I never thought I would hear that.
Right now, they kind of are the Bengals. They're the Marvin Lewis Bengals. They're good enough to get into the playoffs and then get decimated and then get tossed out.
He was close, though. Some injuries go a certain different way. Who knows if Carson Palmer doesn't go down the way he did that one year.
Look, man, in January, everybody's a little bit banged up. Like, I'm tired of the excuses. I'm very much tired of them. And
I was a Marvin Lewis guy. He was solid. Marvin Lewis was solid.
That's fine, but they haven't won a playoff game since the 2016 season, and
that's kind of wild.
I think right now it is the longest streak of like getting into the playoffs and not winning a game, because now 8 consecutive years where each time they've gotten into the playoffs, the last 8 times, or the last 5 times I want to say they've gotten into the playoffs, they haven't won a game. So that's saying something.
I will just say, as a fan of a team who has tanked a lot, that shit don't always work out.
And I get it, man. I get it.
Like, I would just say, let's hold off on we should tank and get a quarterback, when like, just because you bring a quarterback into the room doesn't mean like, oh, everything's fixed now. Like, we're good. We're going to be good now.
Sure.
So it takes a lot more than just tanking and then getting the quarterback and then, you're instantly good. Like,
I'm not even saying tank. I'm saying, like, get aggressive and either trade for a guy, trade up for a guy, like, do one of these things. Like, you can go out and trade for a Justin Fields this offseason. Do it. Like, why not do it? You can go out and try to sign a Kirk Cousins. Do it. Why not? Like, they cannot roll into 2024 with Kenny Pickett, and if they bring back Mason Rudolph as your quarterback room.
But you don't think that's what they're going to do, right? Like, that doesn't seem like that's what they're going to do.
It would not shock me in the slightest if that's what they do. This is an organization that is historically...
Then that's a problem.
They're historically competent, and for the past, I don't know, close to a decade now, like, this just feels like a team that pats themselves on the back for not having any losing seasons. They're content with just getting into the playoffs and just being that team that hangs around. It doesn't seem like they've had any real expectations or goals. And while they'll never, publicly admit that or anything, like, no one is going into this season saying, oh yeah, Kenny Pickett, Matt Canada, we'll get there. No, you're not. So it would not shock me at all if that's what they do, because this is an organization that is historically just not aggressive, very passive, hire from within, the Steeler way, quote unquote. Like, there's a lot of parallels right now between the Steelers and the Patriots in terms of just how bad that they run things. And, everybody, and I know all offseason I'll hear about, oh man, the great Steelers organization and consistency, and, consistency implies success, and they haven't had any for a long time.
Oof. We'll leave it there on the Pittsburgh Steelers. JP, your most surprising result was who this weekend?
Man. Honestly, I don't think I'm really surprised by any of it. Like, of course, I think some of the picks I made, of course.
Go. Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.